An introduction to Deuteronomy. Who? Within Judaism, the Hebrew scriptures as a whole are referred to as the Tanakh. This is an acronym based on the division of the text into three parts: Torah, or law, Nevi'im, prophets, and Ketuvim, the writings. Deuteronomy has traditionally been placed in the first one of these categories, making up the final chapter of the Torah, the book of the law. However, the current consensus on Deuteronomy is that rather than being the final chapter of the law books, it's actually the first chapter compiled and edited by a single school or group of the books that we would probably call the historical books. These include Joshua, Judges, 1 and 2 Samuel, and 1 and 2 Kings. Now, what unites these books is a common theology, of which we see a particularly strong example in Deuteronomy chapters 27 and 28, which is a list of blessings and curses connected to obedience to or deviation from the laws. The Deuteronomist, or Deuteronomistic historian, as the authors of the book are often called, have a clear theological agenda linked to the blessings or punishments meted out onto the people of Israel through history. Despite this connection between upholding the law and receiving the blessings of God, though, Deuteronomy is not concerned with the minutiae of priestly ritual. It's likely, therefore, that it doesn't stem from a priestly source, as does the book of Leviticus and bits of the book of Numbers. The Deuteronomist collects material from a variety of sources as and where they support his theological argument, and makes them into a document which serves as a bridge between the Torah and the Nevi'im. When? Deuteronomy, like most of the books that we've looked at so far, was almost certainly not written all at once. It's possible that there's some very old material contained within it, and the repeating of and expanding on the laws that we've seen in Exodus suggests that at the very least it was commenting on earlier documents. There are a number of pointers, however, which suggest that the final date of composition cannot have been earlier than the 6th century BC. To start with, chapter 17 of Deuteronomy provides us with regulations regarding the installment of a king over the people. This dates the book later than the period of the Judges and during the monarchy, which began in the 10th or 11th century. When we looked at Exodus, we saw that sacrifices were permitted wherever the Israelites constructed an altar. In Deuteronomy, though, this rule is changed. In chapter 12, verses 13 and 14, the people are told that they must only make their offerings at a place that God has set aside for this purpose. Now, this centralizing of the sacrificial system either took place in the reign of Hezekiah in the late 8th century BC, or Josiah in the 6th century. And when we combine this information with the story in 2 Kings of Josiah's rediscovery of the book of the law, this makes that the likelier of the 2 dates. Finally, in chapter 29, verses 21 to 29, there's a passage which seems to foretell the exile of the people in Babylon. If Deuteronomy was, as scholars believe, written as the first part of a history which runs to the end of 2 Kings, this foretelling would in fact serve as a theological reason for the plight of the people, linking a failure to adhere to the law with their military defeat. The theology of the Deuteronomist. Why? If Genesis tries to pull together the exiled community in Babylon and give them a common history, Deuteronomy begins to answer the question, why did this happen to us in the first place? What could we have done to deserve this? By putting everything in the mouth of Moses, the hero of the Torah, in the form of a sermon, the Deuteronomistic historian gives authority to his interpretation of history. And it's this upon which he will expand in the following 6 books.